Everlasting Plastics is a group exhibition inviting practitioners whose works range from art, architecture, and design to reconsider environmental waste and think about the ways in which plastic informs the way that we live and the way that we operate within a waste material world. We have invited these 5 designers to come to the U.S. Pavilion to think about the waste systems from largely the Midwest perspective. All 5 have lived or worked in the region to some extent and think a lot about the relationship that our region in particular has in the production of petrochemical polymers and plastics.
Petrochemical polymers were perfected in the early 1900s in the Midwest and have crescendoed outwards and are now a global phenomenon. And so these 5 artists, architects, and designers are thinking about plastic and reuse in very different ways, kind of playing with the materiality and embracing plastic as an aesthetic perspective within architecture and the built environment. So Ang Lee, whose work that we are standing in right now, is an architect based in Boston, Massachusetts, and teaches at Northeastern University. Her work is really rethinking the afterlives of materials and plastic, and she has diverted EPS foam, which is the foam that you see here, from landfills and is repurposing that here in this structure to illuminate the ways that plastic appears in our everyday lives. And so this material is used in insulation, in houses, and so thinking through how plastic is literally everywhere in our walls, in our paint, in our ceiling, and in our floors. And so she's addressing that within this installation.
Xavi Aguirre is an assistant professor of architecture at MIT, and the work itself is exploring the sort of many ways in which plastic materials create these expectations for performance, and so they are appropriating club culture and nightlife, which are scenes where there's quite a lot of use and quite a lot of engagement. So they're thinking about this idea of proofing as a way of understanding the way in which these materials are both saving and also harming us, and so there's this kind of embrace and an enveloping and a repelling at the same time, and so they're doing that through a multimedia installation.
And Lauren Yeager's work is in the courtyard. She is a Cleveland-based conceptual artist and sculptor. She travels through Cleveland and scavenges from the sides of the road, taking consumer waste, consumer material, while keeping the integrity of their forms to create these columnar sculptures. She's using works that are specifically evocative of Americana and American culture. So we see Coleman coolers, chairs from children's sets, specifically from Little Tykes, which is a children's toy manufacturer in Cleveland, Ohio. And so she's really thinking about the ways in which we engage with plastics and sees the life and the use as a patina that's really giving these sculptures kind of they are being used anew within these forms.
And in the gallery across the courtyard, we have Simon Anton, who is a designer who is based in Detroit. And in this case, he's referencing architectural forms like grates and grills that are typically done to ornament architectural spaces, but using those as a way of critiquing and rethinking the way that plastics have been deployed. So, for example, there is a grate that is a reference to the Federal Reserve in the US, and the grill is thinking about that relationship between commodity and plastic consumption. All of the plastic waste that he used for his work came from scavenging waste materials and waste plastic around Detroit. And
finally, Norman Teague's work is in the Rotunda Norman is a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago and a designer based on the south side of Chicago. He is at the top of his field within design and historically he has been working with wood and metal, and we were really embracing experimentation for this project and invited him to work with plastic, a new material for him and his practice specifically. And so he has created these extruded plastic vessels from recycled materials that reference African basket weaving, and thinking about the ways that cultures come together and how plastic has kind of become this ubiquitous material. He's also bringing back, he's really invested in teaching and mentorship, and so a lot of this work was made with assistants and young people living on the south side of Chicago to teach them about how we become artists and designers and how to work with materials. And the colors also